All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from Hogan, where we will discuss team humility. Before we get started, I want to share a few housekeeping items with you. First, we've placed everyone on mute to avoid distractions and background noise. If you have any questions or troubles with viewing the presentation or hearing us, please type it in the chat area, and we'll be happy to address that. The webinar is going to be recorded, and we will send out a link to the recording in the next couple of days for you to review or share with your colleagues. And if you have any feedback on this webinar or other topics of interest, please contact us at solutionspartner@hoganassessments.com, or you can contact your consultant directly. All right, so I'd like to go ahead and welcome Michael Sanger. He is our senior strategist with Hogan on the Solutions Partner practice, and will be leading our webinar today. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael now.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks everybody for joining us out there in webinar land. This is our fourth webinar of the 2018 series, and it's our second or third year in a row doing this. So we're just so thankful that everyone continues to join, because it means that we're doing something right if you keep coming back. And before I forget, I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving for those who celebrate. And I also hope you all have a wonderful upcoming holiday season for those who celebrate any of the holidays that are upcoming. So with that, we'll get to the presentation at hand, and that is personality and successful teams, or as we said in the invite, with our optimistic, humble, and successful forces combined, or something to the like. At Hogan, we know people, and we also know personality, and therefore we know successful teams. Just a quick intro to personality in the workplace, since it's been a while before we've done one of these types of presentations. So I figured I'd bring out a refreshed oldie but goodie. The personality definition you're seeing in the black bar there at the top of the slide is actually granted by the American Psychological Association, or the APA. And I love it because it's just so succinct and so directly to the point. Individual differences and characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving is what constitutes personality. And why? Well, because personality underlies our behaviors. It underlies our actions, our reactions, and our interactions. It describes the approach we take in the workplace, how we seek to manage change, how we execute our tasks, and how we handle conflict. It basically summarizes our capabilities, or the potential for certain capabilities, by informing the individual of what individual strengths they possess, what derailing behaviors they are in danger of taking on, and the rewards that they seek, or as we say in Hogan, HPI, HDS, and MVPI. The personality, because it underlies our behaviors, because it describes our approach, and because it summarizes our capabilities, it directly impacts team success and its functioning. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And in other words, propensities towards certain strengths and challenges outline job success. The biases and predispositions the individuals bring to the team start to shape the decision-making. The change, conflict, and people management tendencies that team members have will not only determine what type of leader approach they follow, but what type of leader approach they will likely take on. Their preferences and motivational qualities demonstrate team and organizational fit. And of course, the actions, reactions, and interactions are what summarize the team functioning aspects. At Hogan, we're especially, that's all about personality, right, and personality in teams. And the question becomes, at least we ask ourselves internally, well, why would anyone take it from me? Why would anyone ask us? Why Hogan Assessments? Why not a competitor or some other grand poobah of said topics? Our research and the archives and the emphasis on science and data to prove points is one differentiating factor of us. Our reputation, which feeds our reputation, and of course the study of reputation, and our point of view on how personality is nothing unless it is seen through the eyes of the observers. And that's what true strategic self-awareness is. Strategic self-awareness is understanding one's own self through the eyes of others. Prediction is what all that leads to. With good research and a good point of view on how to measure personality assessments, you can begin to predict workplace performance. And of course, we are also alert to context, whether it be an international context or a job-specific context. What is good for safety is not necessarily good for the consultant in terms of personality profiles and vice versa. All of this is why you should take it from us. And I mentioned the research, but what that actually does for us is having 7 million assessments in our archives, having over 700 criterion referenced studies, having our competency libraries and the amount of individuals that we've touched through this assessment, those robust archives enable us to study things like team assessments and enable us to study things like humility in conjunction with that. So, to the point at hand, what are the key ingredients to a good team? Well, if you haven't guessed it yet, I'm probably going to say something to the effect of personality. At its basic core, a team is merely a collection of diverse characteristics or individual members, and they're being asked to work in concert to accomplish an objective. And to do so, each person has to restrain certain propensities or desires for the betterment of the team. In other words, I got to put my self-centered stuff on the back burner for the collective goal. And when you look at it collectively, individual profiles can provide really good insights into the agility or the dexterity of a team. For example, a team's drive, passion, the obstacles they self-impose, the blind spots, it's all the sum of the personalities that are involved, which is what we were discussing before. And we know that successful teams get this blend of personality right. But as my friends the Ninja Turtles in the background beg the question, is there a true universal formula for getting it right? And that becomes the question. So what you're seeing here are the key roles that traditionally and currently Hogan has always endorsed, because ideally if you want, you kind of want some sort of representation of these roles on a team, because results-oriented team members keep the plan on track, and relationships-focused team members socialize ideas and align people around them. The process and the rule followers ensure compliance with organizational policy. Innovative thinkers keep everyone ahead of the curve, and pragmatists ensure feasibility. So it sounds really good, but what we have to understand is context, of course, is also key. Because here, in this model, there's a place for everyone, and everyone has their place. But no matter which role-based model you're ascribing to, whether it be the one I just demonstrated or some other typology, most agree that in order to extract a maximum value, the assessment of the team member's profile in relation to that role should be data-based. And team members' evaluations should be examined in consideration of the strategic imperatives, the operating environment, and the understood goals. Again, the roles are wonderful, but understanding not only someone in their role, but how the role relates to the strategic imperatives, the operating environment, and the understood goals is also key. Because how a team approaches their development and the tasks that are necessary for their functioning is going to vary based on their context. They might be working in a volatile or a stagnant or a gradually changing market. Organizational constraints. How much is the company driven by regulation versus market needs? And how does that affect flexibility within the roles or the need for them, or how these roles relate to the context? Or operational characteristics. Is it multinational, government-run, locally confined, and the line of business that the team resides in? It's not always necessary to have as many innovators in a finance team for a manufacturing company. It's just not that integral. Also, one of my favorite paraphrases that I use in the article that supports this, there's an old line that says, man plans, God laughs. Well, we like to say teams plan, markets and organizations laugh. So no matter what, even if you have the people aligned to the roles and the roles aligned to the context, there's always the unknown that crops up and eats your strategy for breakfast. It's not just culture. It's everything else as well. So considering these factors, again, back to the original question, is there a universal way to get it right when understanding a team's makeup? And when we consider these factors, it's not unreasonable to assert that the optimal constituency of role representation is somewhat fluid and a little bit bespoke. So it's a little bit tailored to the team itself, it shifts a little bit, and that kind of sounds like predicting leadership qualities, doesn't it? If it sounds eerily familiar, you're not alone. And it's very often that because of all of this, because there's no real right answer that tends to hold in a linear fashion, saying that this profile or this magic number or this ratio of ingredients is really what makes the best team, since that tends to elude us, the industry tends to pivot towards something around cognitive. Well, it must be cognitive horsepower then, or it must be creativity. And that opens up yet another rabbit hole that team analysis tends to go down, or team practitioners tend to go down. But unfortunately, for cognitive, it doesn't tend to offer, the G factor doesn't tend to offer much in terms of linking targeted goal attainment. Right? We know that people who have higher G factor tend to perform better. Teams that are made of better performers tend to perform better. But in terms of linking roles and personalities or roles and individuals to the context in order to attain specific strategic imperatives, you will not get that out of G factor. And another pivot that practitioners tend to say, well, okay, well, we know it's about trying smarter, so maybe it's not the G factor. Maybe it's creativity. But again, going back to, say, a finance team in a manufacturing organization, or a team of say, entry-level performers, thought leadership, innovation is not going to be necessary either. So we need to get our head out of the Fortune 50 and understanding these huge teams where every role is necessary because we're trying to do all sorts of strategic imperatives or accomplish them. And get back to, think about those teams of 10 and 20 in mid-sized multinational organizations or in smaller organizations where creativity is not only always necessary and cognitive is not going to predict specifics. By the way, the idea of this slide and the imagery here, a history professor of mine had this great story that I hope you take with you to some of your coaching chairs. It was a lesson on trying harder versus trying smarter. And she said, if you watch the house fly, continuously hit the window next to the open door, that is trying harder versus trying smarter. And what I see cognitive is almost as trying harder in that way. Can we just more power? Can we get more horsepower? But that's not exactly trying smarter. And the creativity is trying smarter. But again, if you start to map innovativeness, you might end up with the upper echelon, and that's not always necessary in most teams. So again, another rabbit hole. And what happens is when you read the literature on this stuff, it's quite chaotic. You start to throw your hands in the air and say, there is no answer. We're tilting at windmills here. There is no perfect team. This is all just a useless mission. But we don't think that's true. We think that we're onto something, and we think that the roles are kind of right, and the trying smarter versus harder is on the right path. But we need a better way to encapsulate this so it's a universal fit. And that comes down to three key ingredients that we're going to be looking at. This first slide is Alvin Toffler, famous philosopher who I think's most notable quote was, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." So to be willing to understand, to learn something, and to reject its premise later on when the landscape shifts, and then to relearn it is one aspect that we're going to be looking into. Realistic optimism, or optimism grounded in reality and emotional control, is another key ingredient. And so if team members are willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn, if they have positive outlook but grounded in reality and emotional control. And if they are prone toward action, but also towards a continuous evaluation of the biases embedded within. So part of also the learn, unlearn, relearn process is making sure that in that unlearning, was I prone to certain biases, not only has the landscape shifted, but has my perspective shifted at all. And so pulse checks with the team are quite necessary. And if you've got team members that are willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn, that are grounded in realistic optimism with emotional control, and that are constantly reevaluating their plans without stalling them, to continuously pulse check without slowing it down, that is what we consider the crux of what I will call applied humility. The humble team member is willing to relearn things. The humble team member is willing to take a pause to make sure that it's going right. And the humble team member is optimistic, but not pie in the sky. Well, also not panicked. So team humility, we feel, is the ultimate keystone. In 2013 study, Brad Owens and his colleagues noted that humility is a characteristic based in behavior that emerges during social interaction and is recognizable in others. Key behavioral characteristics that define humility include trying to view yourself accurately, being able to appreciate the strengths and contributions of others, and being open to new ideas and feedback regarding your performance. That does not mean, by the way, that humility should be confused with deference or a lack of confidence. Research shows humility in leaders can positively impact an organization by propagating employee empowerment and increasing the likelihood team members will demonstrate organizational citizenship behaviors. And you don't get that way with a lack of confidence or deference. A team leader must also be humble, but cannot lack efficacy. And it must not hinder performance. You can't have humility having the opposite effect. And how this ends up being personified, to get at it with an even finer tooth comb, is openness to new ideas, like I said, the attempt to view accurately, and being empowering and appreciative. Must not hinder, got ahead of myself on this slide, must not hinder self-efficacy, positive outlook, or stamina. And what about the leader? What does the leader of a humble team look like? In our view, the success of a team depends on what type of charisma is demonstrated by those who've assumed a leadership position or those who are vying as one. So like I said before, you can't just have humility and that lead to deference or lack of confidence, because then, number one, no one will step up to lead the team, and number two, the team will eventually peter out because they won't have faith in themselves when they hit obstacles. So it's a combination of humility and charisma that leads a leader to rise above the humble team and bring it to success, right? But there's two types of charisma, one that really interferes with what we're trying to get out of humility, and one that actually complements it. And basically, the personalized type of charisma is the type of charisma that gets in the way. So if you've got a leader with personalized charisma, even though they may show humility in certain points, they emphasize obedience, they emphasize immediacy and immediate returns, and team members' needs come secondary to the leaders of the organizations. Socialized charisma, on the other hand, are leaders who step up and not only are humble but also are communicative, encourage integrity, and put the interests of the group first. The psychologist David McClelland is the one who found both of these types of charisma, and if you're interested in any of his or Brad Owens' articles, we'll be happy to follow up after this webinar. This is outside the Hogan walls research, peer-reviewed research on charisma and humility. Team dynamics can make or break cooperative goal achievement. An engaging and effective team leader will have a far easier time guiding a team if that leader cultivates members who consistently demonstrate humble self-assuredness And that's the key. It's not humility over confidence or confidence over humility. It is that socialized charisma complementing humility and being able to toggle both. Excuse me. Additionally, teams will be successful if they have the following. Members who have different personality characteristics, so diversity is key. Otherwise, you'll have blind spots or pitfalls. A leader or leaders who can pull individuals together despite competing agendas. That's just a natural for any team functioning, right? You need a leader that can help individuals put their personal agendas aside for the sake of the team collective, whilst also, as we mentioned, making sure that team needs and the individuals included are not neglected. So put it secondary, but don't neglect it, is the way humility and socialized charisma can complement each other. A willingness to try smarter by listening, evaluating, and correcting. And I cannot emphasize that learn, relearn, unlearn enough. It is really the key. And a combination, as I keep saying, of humility and socialized charisma to support the constant search for feedback in a way that increases self-efficacy and team member empowerment. We have collected these points of view in a little write-up for Talent Quarterly magazine, and we are happy it's a little 4-page write-up that we can forward along in conclusion after the conclusion of this webinar. I know generally speaking, we take a half an hour and then open up for questions and answers. This one was a little bit quicker, so hopefully the audience applauds brevity. But with that, more than happy to take any questions you may have on Hogan, team functioning, or humility.
Thank you, Michael. And as a reminder, if you have questions, if you can go ahead and type them into the chat function, that would be great. And we'll go ahead and just wait a couple of minutes and see if we have any questions and go from there.
Well, it seems like the presentation was self-explanatory, so we hope you enjoyed it. We'll be having more of these sessions next year into 2019, so stay tuned for our invite to quarter one. Oh, we have a question? Do you think humility is reflected in the HPI ambition accomplishment? Well, that's a great question, Charlie. Accomplishment is a subscale that may or may not be mapped to. We're actually doing research into that right now. But just as a reminder to the group, a high score on accomplishment means I feel good about my task once it's completed. You know, I look back and I watch my shower sparkle after it's been cleaned. I don't know whether that feeling of satisfaction or the personality construct that drives that satisfaction relates one way or the other to humility, but we'll certainly take a look as we go into our criterion reference studies. If humble leaders make the best leaders, why do we fall so often for the narcissist? Because personalized charisma is attractive, and it's appealing, and it's provocative, and it feels like that person's going to take care of me, right? Because the personalized charisma says, do it now, I'm your leader, and you don't have to worry about anything else when you're a follower. But we know in the long run, socialized charisma is what really makes us feel good because our needs are met, and the humble leader is the one who's able to recruit followership and get buy-in for the long term. But the reason we fall for those narcissists is the same reason they display their narcissism. It's a tool, and it's an attractive one. What Hogan scores indicate the presence of humility, Katie Cooney asks. Actually, we're still looking into that. So this presentation was more just about humility in general and the theoretical constructs that support it. We are hard at work in the background playing with new items, scales, subscales, and algorithms. That is why we've begun to talk about humility, but we're not there yet on revealing what we're finding because we still have a few more experiments to run. But I'm sure in the beginning of next year, you'll be hearing a little bit more from us formally on humility. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll let you all get to an early lunch here on the in the Mid-America, and those on the East Coast at least get you half an hour to enjoy something.